What does it take to produce pigs responsibly and still stay competitive? That's some of the question we'll be looking into today as demands for sustainability, animal welfare, and transparency grow louder. The pig industry is facing tough questions along the way. How do we earn and keep our license to produce? And that's the topics we'll be looking at today. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for joining us. We're very excited to see such a strong turnout. We have attendees from all around the world, which is a clear sign that this is a conversation that matters and that matters to all of you. I'm very excited to introduce the speaker for today, Mark Henrian from Danbrid's Research and Development Department at the Danish Agriculture and Food Council. Mark has played a key role in redefining breeding strategies that not only advance the industry itself, but also align with the society expectations we have. A balance that's becoming increasingly critical over time and will keep doing this in the future as well. He will share with us how we can strike the exact right balance between productivity, animal welfare, and the environmental responsibility, and why the balance between those matters more than ever. Hitting that sweet spot is what we're looking into. My name is Silbert Rasmussen, and I'm the manager of the Danbrid Academy, and I will be your host today. Before I hand over the stage to Mark, there's just a few practical things that we should also take care of. First of all, we are recording today's session, meaning that we will also be sharing this recording after today's session with all of you and those who registered but could not attend today. We do encourage questions along the way. I know that you are all muted, but please send in all questions during the presentations. They can be written in the Q&A section of the control panel in your Teams session. At the end of the presentation, we will collect all questions in a Q&A session, answering as many questions as we possibly can. If we should miss one or two questions, we will make sure that you have an answer afterwards. I also need to say that even though we are all very used to working in online environments, sometimes technical issues do occur anyway. If this should be the case, please stay on the line and we will try and assist as soon as we can. As I said, after today's session, we will share a recording. This will be sent out by email. We will also share our contact information if any deep dive questions should appear afterwards. But without further ado, I would like all of you to get ready in your seats and get ready with all of your questions, and then we will bring Mark to the stage. So Mark, I hope you're ready to share some knowledge with all of us.
Yeah, sure. Oops. I need to press. Is that better?
Exactly.
Oops, all right. So you're ready for me to go? All right, thanks for that. I hope I can convince you that animal breeding is going to be part of the solution to the challenges that are going to face animal production in the future. So some of the challenges that we think are going to be pretty important are community concerns for the environment, the climate, and animal welfare. And animal breeding can help us tackle these challenges because breeding provides the animals, the genetics that are going to be used in the production systems of the future. So we're in the game of producing, in the case of pig production, producing meat. That's just the reality of it is. But if we're going to do it, we're going to be expected to do it responsibly and safely in the future. So I see this as a talk, as a summary of opportunity, and I see it as a call to action for breeding companies to produce our animal products responsibly, that take that they consider the environment, climate, and animal welfare, which is going to be demanded, I think, by the community. I write animal breeding here as a broad concept, but if you prefer to think of pigs, well, then just substitute that for pig production. It's animal breeding, pig breeding. It's the same. The principles are exactly the same all the way through. All right. So I was asked to provide a vision for the future of animal breeding and particularly in pigs. And if I was to sum up a vision in a nutshell, as unqualified as it is, I think it's pretty simple. Animal breeders use selection to improve desirable traits in animal production, in animal populations. We rank animals for traits that we want to improve. We select the best as parents of the next generation, and we do this while we're controlling inbreeding acceptable rates. We've done this for 10,000 years. It's not going to change. So we're going to be continuing to do what we've been doing for years. We're just getting better at it. What I think is likely to change is the direction of selection. That is, in other words, our breeding objectives. As we breed animals that are going to ease community concerns for environment, climate, and animal welfare in our future production systems. And that's pretty much what I've come to say. And if we wanted, we could stop here, and I could say, right, that's it. But if you want me to continue and delve into a little bit more about this and how we might do this in practice, then I've got three key messages that I want to build this talk around, which is based on providing animals that help us solve the problem of all the challenges facing animal production. So there's three messages, and the first is that animal production, I think it has a future, but it probably needs to change a little. The second message I want to make is that animal breeding it must be part of this change. But to do so, we need strong signals from government and the community. And the third message I want to get out in this talk is that animal breeders, we have the skills to make these changes. But to make these changes, we must do it safely and we must do it responsibly. So together, if we put all these three messages together, I think it highlights that animal breeding is part of the solution to the challenges that are facing animal production in future. So let's hop into the first message, and that is that animal production has a future, but it probably has to change. I have little doubt that animal production and pig production has a future. I'm going to make that clear from right from the start. And there's at least 4 reasons I've got arguments for I think it has a future. That is, animals provide high quality protein, essential nutrients on non-synthetic products that humans use. They are biomass converters. They take biomass that humans cannot eat themselves, and they convert it into products, food, manure, and ecological services that we can utilize. They utilize land that's otherwise unsuitable for other food productions, and they're deeply embedded in social, cultural and social societies around the world. So, and a couple of examples I bring up here about providing high quality protein and essential nutrients is that I've asked a lot of parents who've got young kids, and they ask them, would they be prepared to feed their children on a diet that excluded any animal products? That's milk, meat, eggs, and I haven't heard any say that they're prepared to do that. So it tells me that animals do have a role in the future. It may be smaller, but it's there. So all this to me suggests that has a future. Animal production and pig production has a future. But, however, like most other industries and businesses, these benefits, they do come at a cost. I think we have to acknowledge, and I think we have to accept that animal production, it does use land, it uses water, and it uses a lot of energy. It does degrade and pollute ecosystems. It encourages deforestation, it emits greenhouse gases, it rears animals in captivity. So, and these things are concerns to the community. So if we're going to continue have a license to produce these animals in our animal production in future, then we're going to have to consider these costs that come with animal production, so that we can produce our animal products responsibly and safely, that are accepted by the community. So it needs to change, and it needs to change for that license to produce, and it needs to do so because we need to ease community concerns for the environment, climate, and animal welfare. And what's interesting about that is this is already happening now, and it's been happening for a while. Governments are reacting to these concerns from the community. They're implementing legislation, incentives, and penalties to balance the economic benefits of animal production with the impacts on the environment, climate, and animal welfare. And there's several examples we can highlight here where governments around the world are reacting to this. If we went to New Zealand, they're planning on implementing a levy on greenhouse gases produced by livestock. Belgium and the Netherlands are halving the nitrogen emissions, wanting to halve the nitrogen emissions by reducing livestock numbers. So there's pressure on even animal production in those countries. In Germany, there was overnight, the government there put strict animal welfare legislation on pig production without any consultation with the community or the industry. And the EU is working on its end of cage age project, which is before the Commission, to have that no animals can be kept in cages in future. So these things are happening. They're happening, and the governments are doing something about it, which the industries and animal production have to conform to. Not only do they put constraints or change legislation or incentives and penalties, but they can even close industries. Take you back to the COVID time when the Prime Minister of Denmark actually shut down mink production overnight. And we can discuss the reasons for that and why that happened. But the point is, a whole industry, the third largest agricultural product in Denmark at the time, was shut down overnight. Which highlights that no industry is immune from these impacts from government. And I mean, I open just a thought that once now mink's gone, I wonder if pigs is the one that's now in focus from the community. It tends to be the one that's in the media getting more attention than milk production, dairy production, for example. But I'll just leave that there. That these things are changing. So in response to these reactions from the community and government, we probably need to expand our definition of profit to include economic incentives and penalties associated with the environment, climate, and animal welfare. This will almost certainly lead to new production systems with revamped management strategies and husbandry practices. As producers, they try to cope with the new legislation, they try to pursue the incentives, and they try to avoid these penalties. So by putting forward economic incentives and penalties, we're changing the whole playing field, which means that it changes the way that producers will react to that, which changes the way that we need to be looking at breeding animals that are geared up for production systems that are taking account of these incentives and penalties. And the impacts of these incentives and penalties and legislation, they can be substantial. I've just put forward here 4 production systems for around the world to highlight that what might change in them in the future. In the top left-hand corner, we've got a cattle feedlot production in America. In the next one on the right to that, we've got intensive pig production. We've got organic pig production down the bottom, and we've got insect production down the top. If we ran through each of these, the cattle feedlot production, that seems to have, I would think it would have a poor record for environmental, climate, and animal welfare. It wouldn't score very highly on those, and I would imagine that cattle feedlot production might be might have to alter the way it does that if community concerns continue to grow. If we got intensive pig production, that tends to have lower impacts on environment and climate, but maybe there's some question marks about animal welfare. So there's things that might need to change there. The organic pig production is probably score well for animal welfare, but it might have some environmental and climate concerns associated with it. And then the insects one, we'll probably see new and efficient species introduced into production systems, and insects, microorganisms reared on waste products to generate food and animal feed, a prime candidate for that. So I think this highlights that that animal production, it probably has to change. It's probably going to change, and that change, it might even include some new and efficient species. So which brings me to the wrap up my first message, and that is that I hope I've convinced you a little that animal production has a future, but it probably needs to change. So my second message is that animal breeding, it must play a part in this change. But to do so, it does need strong signals from government and the community. So no matter what production systems there are in the future, whatever they look like, what they do have one thing in common across all animal systems or animal species. They require animals with the genetics that maximize this expanded profit. So animal production has to provide these, animal breeding has to provide these animals that are suited to the production systems of the future, and therefore it must be part of the solution. And the only way that animal breeding can provide these animals is to change our direction of selection. And we do this by defining breeding objectives for expanded profit. We don't have many levers. It's the only lever we have in animal breeding to increase it, to breed for this expanded profit in future production systems. If we're going to change animals, we have to change our breeding objectives. And that means we need to identify the traits that are going to be important in the future, the traits of our animals, the traits of our pigs that are going to be suited to production systems where environment, climate, and animal welfare are part of the makeup. And we need, not only do we need to identify the traits, we need to derive how important these traits are economically. Which traits are more important than others in future production systems. So this is important because it will allocate the appropriate amount of selection pressure to each of these traits so our animals do fulfill what we want them to do in future. Unfortunately, that Danbred in pig production or the animals coming out of Danbred, we're doing exactly that. We are identifying, we are updating our breeding objectives. We're identifying traits. We're driving economic values for these traits that are for expanded profit in what we see as future production systems for pigs. So I'll run through that very briefly. What our breeding objectives were and where we are now and what we might do in future. So this is the list, the very simplified list of the traits that we were breeding for, let's say 5, 6, 7 years ago. We were interested in litter size, growth rate of the pigs, piglets and pigs. We were interested in feed intake. We didn't want them to eat too much food. We want them to have a high meat percentage. We want them to be fit, and we didn't want to have a lot of slaughter weight. And all these traits generally were associated with production efficiency. That was the take back then. Fortunately, many of these traits are also helping us with environment, climate, and animal welfare issues because there are many of them associated with efficiency. If we need fewer resources to make to produce the products that we're producing, to produce the meat from the pigs, then it's going to be advantageous for the environment and climate because we're using less resources to produce that. But we're going to go further than that at Danbred. And recently we've expanded expanded our profit equation. We've got traits that are associated with that expanded profit. So again, we've still got litter size and growth rate and feed intake and meat percentage, fitness, slaughter rates, but now we've also got piglet survival, sow survival, litter weight gain, which are now part of the makeup of what makes Danbred pigs tick, and where we're trying to allocate selection pressure, because those are going to ease some of the community concern for environment, climate, and animal welfare. And not only have we included these traits, we can have a look at the proportion of genetic gain we expect to get to be allocated to where the proportion of genetic gain that comes from each of these traits. Again, this is the list of the traits that are in our breeding objective for this expanded profit. And what I'd like you to note here is that the new traits, piglet survival, sow survival, litter weight gain, they together fulfill about 2/3 of the genetic gain that's made in our pigs at the moment. So not only are we introducing traits that are associated with ease community concerns, we're putting a lot of selection pressure on those traits. So we don't want piglets. We want piglets to survive. We want sows to survive. We can't be seen to having lots of piglets dying and sows dying. And we've got litter weight gain, which says that the piglets, litter weight gain, the piglets are being looked after by the sows. They have the ability to look after the piglets. So all the way through that the pigs are doing well. But we're still putting pressure on the other traits, feed intake and growth rate. They're just not as much pressure. And we're not going to stop there. We're still in the future where we maybe, this is no promise, this is just a list of a short list of traits that will be considered to be included in our definition of expanded profit and could be included in our breeding objectives. Things like tail biting or emissions from emissions that are impact on climate change from the pigs. There could be disorders and there could be production odor. There's some of the traits that could be included in our definition of expanded profit. So the point here is that, yeah, it's the only thing we can do to change animal breeders, as Dan bred. The only thing we can change is modify as our breeding objectives to produce the animals that are going to be cope with production systems of the future and the community concerns. And Danbred's reacted to that, and we're changing our breeding objectives to suit that, so that that we are going to be responsible breeders and producing pigs that are going to do the job with the community and producers demand. I'll just deviate just slightly to say, look, some of these economic values can be pretty tricky because some of them are licensed to produce traits. When I mean licensed to produce traits, I mean they can have non-market values that go far beyond profit margins. Let's take, for example, piglet survival. If piglet survival fell below a level that was unacceptable by the community, then suddenly there is pressure from the government and from the community to shut down pig production. I'm taking extreme to extreme point, but it's to highlight the point that suddenly survival becomes infinitely valuable, because if the community gets restricted, the restrictions on the industry, or we're not allowed to, or the industry gets shut down, to take it to an extreme example, then survival suddenly has an infinite value. So we need to not only look at the value of these traits from a production and profit point of view, but also their non-market value, that are we producing the pigs that the community demands, so that they allow us to a license to produce and stay in production. And if we don't do that, we're going to be hit with, we risk being hit with government legislation. We risk being consumers boycotting products, and we even risk, like the mink, for whatever reason they got shut down, industry closure. So defining new breeding objectives with traits that benefit the environment, climate, and animal welfare, they are challenging, but they're really critical, so that we can tackle these challenges, because breeding objectives are the only way that we can change our animals that are suited to the future production systems. So, but to do that, animal breeders, if we're going to change our breeding objectives, Danbred or any other breeder for any other species is going to change breeding objectives, it needs strong signals from government and the community. The reality is that animal breeders probably won't make changes to breeding objectives before they get strong signals from the government and community. Because animal breeders with good business management are unlikely to be the first movers, because we need certainty. We need certainty before we change breeding objectives. But the problem is there's a long time lag before any genetic gain that we make today is from the genetic gain we make from the decisions today, before they're realised and disseminated out to producers. So if we guess, and we guess wrong, and we get the production systems of the future wrong, then we risk wasting a whole lot of selection pressure on improving traits that just aren't profitable. And if we waste selection pressure on traits that are non-profitable in the future, then we can't compete with other breeders that make the right decisions. So I would call on the governments and the community to assist all stakeholders in animal production by providing breeders with strong and early market signals. And these signals, again, as mentioned before, they're going to be in the form of legislation. They need to be long-term legislation, long-term incentives, and long-term penalties that are unfortunately directed at producers. They have to be directed at producers. because it's producers that then are going to go and seek the animals that suit their production systems from the breeders that are going to provide that. And then the breeders will react to those demands from producers. And by doing that, they would, if governments and communities would provide these long-term signals, it would enable us to define breeding objectives with confidence, with a clear way of a clear direction of selection. We'd be able to avoid traits that could be improved by non-genetic means. We can resist breeding for indicator traits that just aren't that just don't help us with productivity, and also shorten the time that we can provide the animals that the producers want and need in their production systems. So, to wrap up my second part, the second message, that is that animal breeding, it has to be part of the change. But to do so, we need breeders, we need strong signals from government and the community to tell us where that change is going so that we can make the right decisions. So the third message I had is that animal breeders, we have the skills to make these changes required and demand that are needed by the industry. But to do so, we must do that safely and responsibly. So we make animal breeders we make fast genetic gains. And the reason we make fast genetic gains is that we're pretty good at ranking animals. We're pretty good at getting, we got sophisticated genetic models. We got a lot of phenotypes. We have genomic information. We're using technologies that enable us to rank animals well and accurately. And if we can rank animals well and accurately, we can select the best ones that have got the best genes, which means that we make genetic gains and we make it fast. It's pretty impressive. And this is really good news for animal production, or for pig producers, because it implies that we can make fast genetic gains for our expanded profit, the profit that that's going to suit the production systems of the future. But so we're going to do that, and we're going to do it, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it even quicker with time as technology improves. We're going to do it even faster. So that's going to happen. There's no doubt about that. So I'm not going to talk more about that. What I'm going to do is actually here make a call for caution here. If we're going to make fast genetic gains in the future, then the call for caution is that with fast genetic gains, there is a risk of unintended side effects. Unintended side effects that creep into breeding populations because we're making these genetic gains very fast. It's like driving a car at high speeds along the motorway. That the faster you drive, the greater the risk that things can go wrong. And we the reason why this can happen is that we make genetic gain. We make the selection decisions where we don't, without understanding in full the genetic and physiological consequences of selection. So some of these unintended side effects, some of these consequences, they can be unintended behavioral, physiological, metabolic, reproductive, or immunological side effects caused by genetic associations between the side effects and the traits that we're actually breeding for in our breeding objectives. And the faster we do it, the greater the risk. So this is not to say that things are going to go bad. What it is to say, look, what we then need to do is we need some safeguards put into our system so that we can manage this risk. manage the risk of unintended side effects while we're making fast genetic gains. And we can put in these safeguards to make fast genetic gains and make them safely. And 3 of them that we work on at Danbred is that we control inbreeding. So with genetic gain, there's inbreeding. The faster the genetic gain, the harder we select, the more inbreeding. Inbreeding, we don't want inbreeding because it can have detrimental impacts on our populations if it goes wrong, and it can erode genetic variation, which we may need to make genetic gain in the future. But we can strike a balance, and that's what we do at Danbred. We make genetic gains while maintaining inbreeding levels at levels that are safe, and we think, and we at levels that are just safe. So we're hitting a sweet spot here where we're making fast genetic gains, but we're not increasing the rate of inbreeding too much that it's going to have risk having an impact on our population. So the whole idea is we inbreeding control, we genetic gains, sweet spot where we're not getting too much inbreeding in our system. The second safeguard that we've got in our system is we want reliable measurements, particularly for traits that are associated with the environment, climate, and animal welfare. And the reason we want reliable measurements for these traits is that we can allocate appropriate amount of selection pressure to these traits. Often these traits can be difficult to measure, but if we have reliable measurements and lots of them, then what we can then do is balance the amount of selection pressure on each of the traits in our breeding objectives so that the correct amount of selection pressure is being allocated to them, and we get a balanced improvement in each of the traits in our populations. The third safeguard mechanism is monitoring and surveillance, and that is keeping an eye on our populations, where we can uncover unintended side effects before they spread through the breeding populations. So and this is where everyone's involved in it. If a vet or a producer or a breeder sees something untoward in the population, then there's a feedback mechanism that comes back to Danbred, says there's something up here. And that feedback can then be we can work on what is going on, we can rectify it, and we can make sure that if it is a genetic problem, that we can counter it and solve it before it gets out of hand and starts spreading through the population. So that's a really important part of it, that we're monitoring and surveilling that things are going as well as we hope they and should be in the pig populations. So yeah, we're going to make fast genetic gains, and we're going to do that, and we will continue to do that, and it will happen faster. But we need safety mechanisms, and we do have safety mechanisms in place to make sure that we can do it safely and we can do it responsibly, and the community can be comfortable with what we're doing. I was going to point out one more safeguard, which is differs a little bit from the within population, the 3 safeguards that I just mentioned. And this is a little bit more broader one for across the industry. So I think we need to maintain many populations of each commercial breed as a safeguard against production changes and market uncertainty. So by maintaining many breeding populations of a breed, so let's say landrace or Duroc, there are several breeding populations around the world. I think that's a healthy thing, because there's 3 reasons why I think it's healthy. It conserves genetic variation. It increases the probability that some populations will cope better with change that occurs in the future. And it also gives the producers the opportunity to choose animals from populations that best suit their production system. So there's many advantages for having many populations from the same breed around the world. The problem is that maintaining many populations is often at odds with the business strategies of breeding companies around the world. So, we want to ideally we want to keep many populations, but breeding companies have other objectives, and that's just good business pattern. That's just business practices. So, like other businesses, they often seek monopolies. Breeding companies, they compete, they go bankrupt, they merge, they exclude new entrants, and they do seek to monopolize global markets. And we can see that in chickens, where broiler chickens, there's only 3 companies around the world that provide broiler chickens to producers, and there's lots of chickens being eaten around the world. Pig breeders, there's most of the pig genetics is generated by only 6 breeding companies around the world. It's not a lot. The next reason why this is odds with why this is at odds with maintaining many populations is breeding companies. They tend to discontinue populations that don't make a return on investment. So if a breeding population is not profitable, we get rid of it. We had Hampshire and Danbred 15 years ago. There's no Hampshire, so we're now there's a breed that's gone, and they don't get replaced. And the third reason is that companies with the same breed tend to have the same breeding objectives, and if they have the same breeding objectives, they tending to converge, and which means they're becoming more and more similar because of the similar breeding objectives and direction of selection. So we end up in a situation where we've got few breeding companies maintaining fewer breeding populations, and these populations can risk tending to resemble each other. And I think that makes us vulnerable to market fluctuations. It also increases the risk of these populations or breeds being replaced by other breeds, species, and even alternative food sources. So there's a dilemma here, which we need to get right. I think we need to balance the economic drive to concentrate breeding populations with a need to maintain many populations. And this is where I would advocate for government intervention to resist global monopolization of genetic resources. I think we have a choice. We can leave breed security, genetic security, at the mercy of breeding companies and economic forces, or we can intervene and resist global monopolization. I'd advocate for intervention. So, to wrap up my third message, and that was that animal breeders, we have the skills to make the changes that we need, that the industry needs in the future to cope with community concerns. But we do need to do it safely, and we need to do it responsibly. So, I hope I've come with 3 messages. I hope they're clearish. The first is that animal breeding, I think it has a future, but it probably has to change. That animal breeding must be a part of that change. But we do need we need clear signals from government and the community. And the third is that we have the skills, animal breeders have the skills to make those changes, and we can make them fast, but we need to do it safely and responsibly. So as I said right at the start of my talk, I hope I've convinced you that animal breeding, pig breeding, is part of the solution to the environment, climate, and animal welfare challenge that will be facing animal production in future.
Thank you, Mark. I am pretty sure I speak for all of us if I say that you've given everyone some food for thought anyway. We have some questions coming in. So get ready for the Q&A session, Mark. And I think we will start up slowly. Please keep sending in your questions. You might also have questions to the answers Mark comes up with for some of the questions. So keep them coming. Mark, you've given a lot of interesting points along the way. And of course, you started off explaining a little bit about the traits that we have in the den-bred breeding objective and how the traits and the distribution of the traits have developed over time. We have a little bit question on the trait piglet survival specifically that I hope that we can elaborate a little on. So how do we actually focus on piglet survival and what is it that we do on piglet survival? Because there's many things going into making a piglet survive, colostrum being one, and how do they handle that in production? But they are very curious to know how piglet survival is being handled in the breeding objective.
It's piglet survival. It's you survive or you don't survive. It's as simple as that. And the nice thing about that is that that it covers, what makes money? Let's simplify this. What makes money is whether a pig survives or doesn't survive. It's not whether there's high colostrum or whatnot in the milk. However, if the piglets do survive, this is where I make a compromise. If the piglets do survive, and it happens to be associated with colostrum, then colostrum levels will increase because it's correlated with survival. So everyone wins on this one. The beauty of the survival thing is it's a really good story, is that it's a trait which if you traditional genetics, you said animal breeding, you said the heritability is really low. It's about 1%, if that, which means like textbooks will say, oh, you can't make much genetic gain. But we measure so many piglets that the information that comes, we have so much information on these pigs that it allows us to rank the animals pretty reliably for piglet survival, that once we introduced piglet survival in the breeding objectives, we saw straight away piglet survival increase dramatically. It's incredible. So yeah, as a student at uni, you're probably going, oh, there's not much you can do about that. But there is, because you get lots of information which helps you rank the animals. And there's enough genetic variation in our populations to make these changes.
Thank you, Mark. I think you nailed the answer on that one. Always nice to have a confident answer. I know that you are very committed to the project and you're very engaged as well, which comes off clearly. We have a lot of data in our system, as you say, and we collect a lot of data and we do a lot of analyzing on the data that we have. You also mentioned having reliable measurements in the system is key to making genetic progress and doing it safely as well. How do we ensure that we have reliable measurements? You say that piglet survival is either you are alive or you're not alive. And that is, of course, fairly simple, but we have a lot of other traits in the system. So how do we ensure the reliability in the measurements and the data that we have?
Now we want because we want traits that ideally we want traits that that are what we're trying to improve. But there's some traits which cell survival, for example, we can't measure cell survival on boars. And there's a trait where we then need to counter that. We then need measurements on lots of sows. To counter that, so boars, how good a boar is at producing sows that are going to survive. There's quite a distance between what we're breeding for and the information, the animals that we're breeding. That we need lots of measurements from lots of animals that are related, and help us to connect that. Genomic information also helps us connect that we know what genes the sows have, or we know which boars are producing the sows that survive, and that helps us associate or determine how good, predict how good a boar's going to be at producing offspring that are going to, or to produce that are going to, sows that are going to be that are going to survive. I don't know if I've answered that question well enough. If I've understood the question.
Yeah, you are on the right track, I think. No, you are, and you are talking about some of the things that we really want to highlight. So what is important, and how do we actually do it when we are in the farm and when we're looking into the data as well. But I think it's fair to say from your answer that we have a lot of different systems and methods surrounding the whole data collection and the analysis of the data. Not only looking at the recording itself, but looking at the recordings from the relatives, from the family, comparing that to the genomic information and so on, so that we have a lot of different things and methods in the system that make sure that we have reliable data.
Oh, so maybe I've misunderstood the question. Ideally we want records on every animal for what we're trying to breed for. The point about the balance, so we want genomic information, we want phenotypic information. There are some animals where there's some traits where we can't measure on all animals, or it comes a little bit later. So we need to compensate for that some of this information comes later on in the system. So it's not going to be as reliable. So what we don't want is some traits, like growth rate, for example, we risk drowning out other traits because every animal can be read for growth rate, and it's got a highly heritable and stuff like that. So we need to compensate for some traits that are penalized because just by biology or cost or difficulty in making measurements.
Yeah, exactly, Mark. Thank you. And you can say that the amount of data is key in what we do. So the more data we have, gives us more genetic products. So can't do anything without the data. We have to have the data to support it, and we need to be able to rely on the data for it to be valuable for all of us.
Yeah, and that's the advantage of a centralized breeding system. Everyone puts in, everyone gets out.
Exactly. And when we are talking about data and the way that we are collecting data, the way that we look at our traits and the way that we breed for a specific trait. And if we go back to the piglet survival trait, piglet survival is a specific trait into the dendrit breeding objective. And the way that we look at it is either a piglet is alive or it dies. So it's a 1-0 option on the data score. But is this a method that we usually do? Is this because it's an easier recording or registration to do in the farm, or is it because of the data we get in? So what's the device in having the data recorded like this, 1 or 0? Because it could also be the different reasons for the piglet dying, you could say.
Yeah, so maybe I need to just at the moment when we measure survival, it's at the litter level. So you could say every piglet gets alive dead, but when we analyze it, we say what proportion of piglets survived in this litter, and that does the job perfectly well. We will eventually go over to individual piglets because we've got some ideas of improving that even further. So the question then, sorry, it was that how do we analyze it?
Yeah, well, you can say, why do we just record dead or alive? Why don't we record the reason for the piglet dying? So is it a hernia? Does it have a bad leg? Was it crushed? Why don't we record a reason for dying? Because this could also be valuable information.
Yeah, no, sure, it could be valuable information, but it's by the end of the day, it's survival we're interested in. And then, okay, we say, all right, let's we're interested in survival. That's at the end of the day, that's what makes money. Survival, not survival. Let's go and say, all right, let's divide survival up into hernia, got a cold, bad leg. You keep listing. Is there more? There must be a long list of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, so then we say, okay, let's try and fit these sophisticated genetic statistical models to 25 traits of survival. It doesn't make a lot, and we're going to breed for each of those things. And we're not going to breed for each of those things. That's fine. Sorry, I put it as a question, but we're not going to do that. And then how valuable are each of them? And if you put pressure on each of those 25 traits, then you can say, well, how are we going to make any gain in cell survival and feed intake and growth rate and stuff when suddenly we're concentrated on 25 different forms of survival? It becomes completely impractical.
Yeah, so first of all, it's a balance of having the right amount of traits in the breeding goal to have enough genetic gain on all of the traits, or the traits that you've chosen to have in the objective. And then second of all, you can choose various amounts of death causes into the system, but there's also a chance of putting too much pressure on a wrong trait. Is that correct?
Sure, and we don't know anything. We know very little about each of those traits. We don't know how the traits are related genetically, phenotypically. I would bet that you would be getting data sets where all the pigs survive for hernia. In some cases, it'd be difficult data sets. It's where, I mean, we can go out to the world and say, yeah, we've got pigs that don't die of hernia, but they die of everything else. I mean, it's survival. That's at the end of the day, what it's all about. And survival will include all those things that we mentioned. It takes them all as a one bag and says, right, that's survival, whatever the reason is. And if let's take the ideal world, let's say we get up to 95% survival. Well, you've done your hernia, you've done your leg problem, you've done your cold, you've done your lung diseases and diarrhea and whatnot, because they all survive.
Exactly. So no matter how you turn it around, if you breed for dead or alive, you include all of the different reasons for the piglet dying.
Yeah, and what we're trying to, well, okay, now I can emphasize, say, look, we're trying to get away from, we not want to breed for indicator traits. Indicator traits only if they benefit what we're trying to breed for. But this idea of we want to breed for birth weight of piglets. That's great, but there's no economic value in birth weight of piglets. But someone say, oh yeah, but it's associated with piglet survival. Well, beautiful, but if it is that, then the piglets will get born, that are born will become bigger, because that's the underlying cause of piglets surviving. So, but you don't want to be, if you go start chasing indicator indicator traits, you start deviating from where you want to go. You want to go from Aarhus to Copenhagen. Well, if you start doing indicator traits, you're going through Berlin, and it's going to take a lot longer to get there.
Exactly. Thank you, Mark. I think that clarified it for all of us how we do it.
If you get there.
Well, I'm confident that you are exactly on the right path of getting us there. When we are talking about balanced breeding in this perspective, we have a lot of data coming in. We do a lot of reliable measurements. We want to do it in a safe way, and we want to do it in a way so we have a product fitted into the future of pig production. This is quite a balance and quite a task as well, putting all of this into a model and making sure that we know or can predict what's going to happen. How do we try to do that?
We've got to do something. We can't do nothing. So
No.
yeah, but we have people that we look into crystal balls, and we try to see how the future's going to pan out, and what's the most probable outcome, and what are the traits, effectively what pig is going to be profitable in the future. And it's future where we are making best guesses about how the future's going to look and what pigs are going to be the best ones. I don't think we're going to get it too wrong. We might not hit the mark 100%, but no one's going to hit the mark 100%. And in the world we have at the moment, who can foresee what's going to happen in the next 10 years? I mean,
no, well, you can say you've mentioned political situation and government decisions being made on behalf of full industries. But if we're looking at best guesses of an industry and the world in general, how do we balance all of this off when we look into what is society's expectation? I think we have a lot of people concerned about the environment, what's happening with global warming, and I know that we're looking like far ahead in the crystal ball. But is that also part of the mindset when you look into the crystal ball? So how far do we go?
Yeah, well, how far do we go? I'd like to think that we're looking 20, 30 years down the track. It's going to be, so some of these traits start reaching producers after 1 or 2 generations. Sow survival, for example, will take longer to get out there. We take 10 years before the full impact of sow survival's out there. So we need to get that one. We'd like to think we're going to get that one right, because in 10 years things might have changed a bit. But we believe that it's the right way to go. That these doing the right thing will win through all this turbulent time we're going through at the moment, and the community will want pigs that, yeah, they're a good product, yes, they're efficient, yes, the producers are making profit, and yes, the consumer says, I'm prepared to buy that product because it's fulfilling some of the criteria that I demand that the industry lives up to.
Yeah, and you can say the big question is, well, I started saying that we need to have the license to produce, and of course the consumers are a big part of that, but it's also to outlying positions. So you have societal expectations looking at environment, animal welfare, and the other hand, you have the producers and the pig industry looking at how can we have a as profitable a production as possible, because this is our livelihood.
Hmm.
But will the two ever go hand in hand in your objective?
Will they not? I mean, the only reason these new traits are included in the breeding objective is because we think they're going to make the pigs most profitable in the future. So piglet surviving is win-win for pig and sow survival is win-win for everyone. One is that you've got more piglets to work with. You don't need, I mean, however you sell it, if you only want to work with so many piglets, we need less sows. Well, that's just a no-brainer. And the community, we don't get TV programs, documentaries of pig production saying, look, here's so many piglets that have died in the last week in Denmark, sort of thing. If the less of those sort of documentaries, where instead of having that documentary, you can say, wow, imagine a documentary saying that 85, 90% of all the piglets born in Denmark actually survive. That's wonderful advertising for an industry that, I mean, that's profit all the way around, I would have thought.
I completely agree, and I think that's the dream scenario for all of us, especially when all eyes are on the pig production in terms of how we do production and what is it that we're looking into. And you can say that profit does go hand in hand with the animal welfare perspective, but also society in general, because some of the things we're looking at are exactly the same issues. We're just talking about it in different terms.
Yeah, sure. I would imagine the media and the industry has an impact on what foods at least a subset of the community buy. And if they're happy with what we're doing, then there's a greater chance that they'll buy that products. And there's I don't think there's anything wrong with aiming high. Why not aim for 90% survival? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with aiming for 95%. I mean, whether we get there or not is another discussion, but I think it's okay to aim high.
The higher you aim, the higher you score, right?
You like to think so.
Yeah. It's a very interesting discussion, Mark, for sure. And you are looking into some very exciting tasks, both now and moving forward. And you can say that there's a lot of methods and models that you use to predict all of this, or to try and put together a picture in the crystal ball to say, how do we get there, and where do we end up if we do certain measurements? But are we looking into anything new? Is there anything new coming into the market in terms of methods or genetic research or anything like that to take into consideration from a dendrit perspective, of course?
Yeah. We're always on the lookout for measurements, traits, phenotypes that can help us rank animals more reliably. And we're always on the lookout for models that can use this information and spit out results that allow us to rank animals more reliably. So we've had projects where there's going to be, and there will be project after project where we think there's something here, but it doesn't live up to expectations. But suddenly we'll get one, and that's the whole hunt for making these small and they're marginal improvements on what we're doing, because we're doing a reasonable job at the moment. We're trying to better that by small increments each time. We've been looking at metabolomics. Metabolomics is you have DNA, then you have all these little pathways and molecules and then that ends up being the end product. So DNA, little molecules running around the soup of the system, and then expressed in a trait, growth rate or input. And we looked into we looked in and said, okay, if we measure some of these molecules, can that help us estimate, predict the genetic potential of an animal a little better than if we didn't do that? And there's modest increases at best. So we probably won't be implementing that. But now we're looking into other ways we can again measure these, well, estimate how good, well, predict how good animals are going to be. I think one of them could be AI with monitoring, watching piglets the whole time and getting AI to tell us which ones are aggressive, not aggressive. That could be a way of a way into and open up for a whole world of new opportunities.
Yeah, there's a lot of options to go with on that one for sure.
Yeah,
when the time comes.
Yeah, but we're working with biological systems, so they're not. It's not always straightforward in a system that where we're already putting a lot of selection pressure on the pigs. It's limited how far we can, how much gains we can make at each new change.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But there has been a lot of new changes over the last few years. So you do still expect a lot of genetic progress to come. Of course, there's a limit to everything in terms of how much variation you see in a trait, but you're on the lookout. But remember, all the time.
each improvement's cumulative. So we're building on all the improvements we have made. So that makes it pretty impressive.
I completely agree, and I think the job that you're doing, predicting how the world is going to look, in our case, and for the pig industry in general, I think that's fairly impressive on its own. So when we're looking at this, there's a lot of discussion on, of course, what kind of new methods are we looking at? Technologies, AI. There's a lot of different options, and it's a work in progress in finding the right path to the goal. Of course, there's been a lot of changes over the last few years with new traits on piglet survival, sow survival, and litter weight gain. What do you think will be the next big thing? Are we looking at the behavioral traits or something completely different that we haven't thought of yet?
So you're thinking the next trait that will be included in the breeding objective, or the next technology that will be used to measure some of the traits that are already in the breeding objective?
Now I'm looking for the next new breeding objective. So the next new trait.
So you're making me, you want me to throw my cards on the table. But you're not going to hang me up on this, are you?
I'll try not to. Just your perspective on what will be the next new thing. So I know that you're looking into the models and looking at how we can predict what will happen with the industry and the changes that we make. How will that make the world develop? But what do you believe will be the next big thing?
All right, I'll go a behavioural trait. Something like tail biting.
And now you're getting very specific on the trait itself, or the reason for having bad behavior, or what you see in the farm when we experience some behavioral issues. But do you believe we will have the same approach as we've had so far with a lot of the other traits? So kind of the black box method. So we look at how the pigs behave in the pens and then go from there, or do we pinpoint something specific like tail biting, for instance?
Yeah, good question. It could be broader in that you want it probably be something broader where it's you want pigs that are passive. They associated with growth rate, for example, that you have a pen of pigs that grow. They grow fast, but they grow evenly, and that's because they have a behavioural setup that they don't need to go and belt the other piglet, or another piglet doesn't feel that it's going to be belted next time. And I wonder if some new technologies that have been talked about now that can help us identify who's the aggressor, who's the subordinate one, and that can help us pull out, okay, let's breed for pigs that are less aggressive and pigs that are prepared to stand up for themselves, or something like that, that says that the pigs don't need to with just the aggression in the pens, is at least the genetic component is improved. You're not going to. I'm only shooting from the hip here.
That's also good. That's also always some of the good discussions. But I hear you saying that everything will still be a balance. So it won't be one over the other. It will still be looking at the different traits. So looking at behavior, which is, of course, something to do with productivity, but also what we expect from society on animal welfare and how the animals are reacting in the production systems.
Yeah.
So I hear you saying the same, going the same line anyway.
Yeah, and in principle, the principle behind it's not going to change. It's still about producing pigs that are profitable in production systems of the future.
Exactly. I think we are thinning out on questions. I would like to ask you one last thing. So from today's session, there's been a great presentation from you, of course, with some insights into what you believe the industry will be looking into and how we can try to solve some of these challenges with breeding. But what do you believe is the most important takeaway for the people listening in today?
That we believe that pig production has a future, that animal breeding has a huge role to play in that, because we're going to be producing pigs that are going to be profitable in the future. But we're doing it. We're doing it responsibly and safely, so that we're producing pigs that are profitable. They're profitable because they're productive, and they ease consumers' concerns for the things that they're concerned about, be it environment, climate, and animal welfare issues, things that make them buy or not buy. And I don't know what the future is going to look like, but I've had a crack at it. We've had a crack at it. We've had our best. That's our best bit. We've thrown our cards on the table, and maybe we're not got it quite right, but at least people can throw their card on the table, and we can discuss it.
Exactly, Mark. And I've also heard you say a few times, maybe not today exactly, but I've heard you say a few times that when you're doing breeding and you're predicting the future, there's not necessarily a right or wrong. So everyone is just doing their best and having the best guess put into the perspective of the way that they do business.
Yeah, and when we talk about future, everyone has an opinion, but everyone can have an opinion, and we've probably all got different opinions about what will be the best pig in the future. But yeah, and they're probably all valid.
Exactly. Great. I don't think we have any more questions, Mark. So I am going to let you off the hook for now. And we're going to round off for today's session. First of all, I would like to say thank you to you, Mark, for sharing some of your insights and wisdom, both to me and also to the participants listening in. I think I speak for all of us, me for one, when I say that we all want to be part of the solution for the future of pig production, because this is where our heart lies and what we want to do with the future. And we want to make sure that we can keep the pig producers licensed to produce, because this is also our license to produce. And I think we all agree that there's many ways of doing this, and what we in Denbrit believe to be the sweet spot or the right balance might look different somewhere else. As I said before, breeding doesn't have a right or wrong answer necessarily, but we believe that the way that we have approached it in Denbrit, the approach to balanced breeding through a lot of qualified advanced breeding methods, as you work with, Mark, is how we ensure sustainable pig production in the future. So thank you for clarifying this topic for us, Mark, and giving everyone something to think about when they go home. Thank you to everyone who participated, and for those of you who shared excellent questions along the way, thank you to you as well. If anyone should have more questions after today's session, we will be sure to answer all of those who reach out to us for in-depth information. As I mentioned in the beginning of the session, you will receive an email afterwards with both the recording from today, our contact information, and also a short evaluation form to help us improve for future knowledge sharing sessions like this one. I would also just in the end like to encourage all of you to follow us on your relevant social media platform. We want to keep you as updated as we can on all of the knowledge that we want to share with all of you. But thank you for participating and for all of your engagement and commitment. And we hope to see you again for future sessions. Thank you for today. Thank you, Mark.